Thank you very much for coming onto the podcast, Elliot. It's absolutely fantastic to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to ask you the same question I ask all my guests. What is your money story?
I thought you were going to ask me to marry you. There you go. There you go. Will you marry me? What is my money story? I think, that's such a loaded question, right? Because there's so many kind of different answers and angles. I'm going to say that my money story is a bit like it's the story of learning to pursue a partner. It's a story of learning to maintain a partner. It's a story. It's a very much like a marriage, isn't it? I mean, my money story, I feel, is very much like that. I felt for years and years, as I was growing up, I didn't feel that, I watched a mother that was a workaholic and worked really hard for money. And I had a father that was an alcoholic, who never had money. So I kind of had both extremes when I was growing up, literally a workaholic mother and an alcoholic father. So to me, part of my money story, a bit like women in my case, represented quite a lot of pain and rejection when I was growing up, right? It wasn't something that stuck around. It wasn't something that I had a great relationship with. That's why when you ask that question, I feel it's a bit more like the pursuit of finding my ideal partner, right? And I think that carried on for years. Even when I was really young, I invested in a property. I say young, fairly young, my 20s in Leeds.
You're still young now.
I am still young now. It's true. I'm only 22. So,
exactly.
I invested in property in Leeds and then we sold it and I sold it for quite a lot of money 2 years later, and out of, yes, I put some money into bonds, but then I gave myself a gift. And obviously that money didn't last very long because I spent it. And when I started to deep dive into my relationship with money, when I started this personal development journey and stuff, there's a little bit about it in my book. I realized that I pushed money away, a bit like I used to do with women. It's like, hey, stay away, pain, right? And it wasn't until I really learned to welcome and value my relationship and respect money and understand that it needs investment energetically that things started to shift. But that doesn't mean in the meantime I didn't end up bankrupt. So I did take some of that money that I bought that property in Leeds and bought a place in Wales, in Cardiff, right, not far from the Millennium Stadium. Yeah. And then that, again, what happened in the recession back in 2008, that helped, kind of crashed me financially. And then I think 2011 is when I declared personal bankruptcy and I gave the property back to the bank. And, I think that's when I realized that I need to deal with this. That's not in 2010, it began my journey. Because actually, funnily enough, a girl I was in love with dumped me for a billionaire. So there's always this kind of literally a billionaire. I'm not joking. It's not like, he literally, if you Googled his name, he's on Forbes tops 100 or something wealthy people. That's okay. We're friends. We're really good friends now. It's all, it's all what I needed to go through. So up until certain points, money used to represent pain, a lot of pain, a lot of rejection. It doesn't stick around. So therefore, even if I had it, I'd pushed it away. But then I learned to make peace with it. I whatever the energy, whatever we want to refer to money as. Obviously it's an energy, it's a flow, but I'll refer to it as it without any disrespect because I think that's just easier. Or call it money. And so much so that when I started to really do this healing journey, when I was doing my seminars, Power to Succeed, which I used to do, I used to actually have an exercise where people talk to money. And then there are certain questions that I would guide them through. And because that's what I did. I sat there and had a conversation and then I would answer as money. It sounds a bit psychotic, a bit like schizophrenic,
No, I do exactly the same. So I totally get it.
Yeah. So I've done that. And then that to me was the big moment. Obviously I was talking to myself and talking to different parts of myself. I'm aware of that. I'm not that delusioned, maybe a little delusioned. And that was a shift. And when it had such a profound impact on me, I did it with other people when I used to do my seminars. And literally I would see people break down, crying, smacking the floor. Like, you could just see the shift in them. And I did that for years. And after I kind of went bankrupt, it was weird because almost once I got rid of the debt, it made way for money. And that's when I started to make some really good money for years. And then was doing really, I think I was doing okay up until obviously, like most of us, the pandemic. And I think if ever there was a test to your resilience, and even resilient people were tested during the pandemic, that's when I feel that, that's when the rocky times again started with money. And just coming through that this year. And it's just been a very interesting, but I mean, it was nothing like going bankrupt, nothing like, oh my God, I can't eat, I can't feed. It's nothing that extreme, but that energetic conflict I could feel with money brewing up. So, but that's been dealt, that's shifted again. And ironically, I think it kind of also mirrored some challenges I had around relationships. So there you go. It's quite interesting. So that's a little bit of my money story.
And I love the synergy that you bring between, or the analogy you bring between relationships and money, and recognizing that you treated both in a very, very similar way by rejecting them.
Yeah.
And that is, I always see, that is always so true, because how we do money is how we do everything essentially in our lives. So anybody who is not addressing their relationship with money is actually avoiding addressing other things in their lives that could be even more impactful, or impacted, I should say, if they actually sat down and worked out, what does that relationship, what do all my relationships look like? How do I want them to look like? And what do I need to do to make them work for me and the kind of life I want to create for myself? So I loved everything that you said there. When you think about money, so based on what you said there, the conversation you would have with yourself as though you were money. Mm-hmm. When you think about money now, how do you imagine it?
It's interesting because I think there's been an evolution even in the last 2 years, obviously, with that. And I think now, when I imagine money, I think it's something that I imagine that has a connection to something greater. I definitely injected spirituality far more in the last 2 years. Even something quite godly. I'm not saying it's God, or I'm not elevating it as a God, but something quite spiritual. I see it as gold, right? I see it as gold. When I look at money, I think of gold, and I think of almost like, heaven's army and the gold within heaven's army, and unlocking the wealth. In that respect, I don't mean like I'm now a religious fanatic, because I'm not, or even more religious. I've always been religious and believed in a God. Different conversation. So to me, it's evolved into that realm without hitting the mic. It's evolved into that realm, as in something that's a tool that's used for something greater, that's bigger. I definitely see that I have access to it with the right approach, with the right drive. I mean, right in front of me is a prayer for abundance that I say every morning. And, I just think something definitely shifted. And so when I visualize money now, I kind of see gold and access to gold. And maybe it's because gold is one of the most stable things you can invest in, literally. I don't know why. But that's where it evolved into. Before, it was literally, it almost had a female figure to it that, and that's now shifted into something completely different. That's what money looks like to me now.
Yeah. And would you say you're more respectful about money now? Has that changed for you?
I mean, since I went through that process about a decade ago, I respected money. I've always respected money, but I think what's happened the last couple of years is, while I respected it, it needed a different level of vibration, or a different level of, I needed to shift our paradigm. Because, it's a bit like whenever you go up a level, there'll be resistance. There'll be something that and it's the same with money. It's like, people that make 100 grand might never move beyond that, because they're not clearing the space for 1 million, or et cetera, right? Why can people, I say with a snap of their fingers, why can people go from broke to making 1 billion to broke to making 1 billion? Because they've got that space, the capacity, of course, the strategies to do it. And while there's people that will never break the 50K mark, right? So I think for me, the last 2 years, if I talk about my relationship with money, has been about elevating my spiritual and my vibration towards money. And with that came resistance, right? You can't have yin without yang, or you can, then you're delusioned or depressed, right? So to have that balance, but it took a couple of years. It took a while for me to really shift it. And that doesn't mean I wasn't making money, because I was making money, right? You know, you and I worked together. It wasn't like I didn't have the money, but there was something that was massively resistant. And I was even talking to my coach at the time. I did a lot of work with her on it. And again, it was about reforming that conversation with money, you know, and welcoming money, but in a different level and different vibration.
And I can totally get that, because I definitely have more respect for money than I previously have had. And I think that's come through a greater awareness of gratitude and being grateful, because I know I certainly had a mentality of, I've got it, I'll spend it, and if it's wasted, it doesn't matter. It's only £10, it's only £20, it's only £50. And then actually over the last few years, becoming very aware that whilst I had the money, how much more money I could have had if I actually if I looked after the pennies, and the pounds would then look after themselves, as that lovely phrase goes. So I do think being more mindful about money is not something to shy away from. It's something to be really, really aware of, because I think that respect actually is probably reflective to a certain extent of something going on where you're not fully respecting yourself either. And when all of a sudden you do go, well, hang on a minute, if I hadn't wasted that £10 there, or that particular thing is not working now, but I can't be bothered to go to the shop and complain about it. Well, where else am I letting myself down, essentially? And I think the more mindful we can become with regards to our attitude about money and our own sense of self-worth and self-value, the more we can have that wake-up call that says, something is not right here, essentially, for us.
Yeah. And I think, because, well, still, I think for a lot of people, there's two key elements that represent pain or mass pleasure, right? And that's money and love, right? If we look at it, if we stripped it right back, and the two did, like you talked about, do coexist. And I feel that often when you have a great relationship with one, you have a great relationship with another. And it's not like money brings happiness, but it does give you more options, right? And I think, sure, I've seen extreme poverty when I've visited certain countries, and there's incredible, joyful, grateful people with what they have, right? And I think you look at us and like just how much choice we have around us. And I think we can always improve and elevate and be grateful. Like you say, I live in the California of the UK, in Devon.
I know.
And I look around and I'm like, wow, I'm so grateful. I'm so lucky. And to some people, I go, because we do have a big house and we do have a good life. And that isn't necessarily reflective of our wealth or the money I make, but it's a more reflection of the gratitude. And actually, even when times were tough, I would look around and go, well, look, there's food on the table. I can pay my rent, right? I can pay for this. Like the kids aren't affected. So actually, we're still okay. It's just, it's a lot tighter. And I think a lot of people can get really sucked into the lack, what's missing, or what money represents to them, which is often the voids, the lack, or the pain.
Yeah.
Versus going, well, that doesn't have to be the story moving forwards. Because I grew up, we didn't have money. Like, I had clothes, I had food. Yes. Okay. So I'm very lucky. But I didn't have money for new clothes. Like, I didn't get spending money, or a lot of it. I remember I used to go out and the kids always had all this money and I'd have like a £5 or whatever. Well, everyone had 20 quid. And I always remember going, oh, everyone has so much more than me. But now when I look around, it's not like, oh, so much more than others. Not at all. I've got what I need to have and what I'm happy to have.
Yeah.
Sure, there's people next door that have a lot more, and there's people next door that don't have as much. But it's not about that. And again, I think a lot of people get sucked into the comparisons as well. And that's where it becomes very dangerous and very toxic. And, we've all seen people that are extremely wealthy and you'll never know it. And then you'll see extremely wealth and that you'll always know it. And I think, again, money's just a magnifier.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you. Now, I know your children are, relatively young at the moment, so there's lots of time for them to be considering what they want to do. Mine are 17 and 14, and my 14-year-old has kind of hinted now he'd quite like to start his own business when he's older. And I must admit, my first reaction to that was, no, don't do it. I didn't come into running my own business until I was in my early 40s. And I think, by then I'd had experience in the corporate life. I had bought my first house. I'd moved to my second and third house, etc., etc. So I had a certain amount of stability behind me. Is becoming an entrepreneur something that you would encourage in your children?
Yes, if that's their chosen path, right? I think, I guess I was always entrepreneurial and I wasn't aware of it. There's great things to being an entrepreneur and there's terrible things to being an entrepreneur, right? Like, you don't get any certificates for your martyrism. You don't get any, no one's going to go, well done for surviving on that uncertainty and for living on the edge all the time. So I think if my kids either of them want to be entrepreneur, and if when Ariella or Elijah at the age of 14 or 10 or 12, I want to launch a business, I will get behind them, right? And I will say, right, let's do this. And I will help poke them and guide them as best as I can. So either they fail forwards and fails fast and they learn the lessons and pick themselves up, or they go, you know what, this isn't for me. And it doesn't mean they can never come back to it, because they can come back to it, right? There's many people that go get a job and come back and leave and go get a job and come back to it, right? But I will definitely encourage them to, because, if they can build the life they want and live to their own vision, then I think they'll just have a happier life. I think, because many of us, I've been a corporate trainer. I was a corporate trainer for years. And here you are serving someone else's vision, making money for someone else. And you might get paid very handsomely, but it's still not yours, right? A bit like people that build all these massive businesses on Facebook and then boom, everything shuts down because Facebook is like, it's gone. It's the same with you're living on someone else's vision and they can just go, bye, they'll crack on. So no, I definitely will. And, it's funny because I'm like, are they looking like it? And I'm not sure right now, Ariella, she's only 6, but she loves writing. So, she's creative, right? And my son, he's only 3, but he's very good with a ball. So I put him into rugby. But you and I know, it's so early days.
Yeah.
But if they turn, because Ariella was already, she likes shops, she'll open a cafe, she loves maths. So if she's like, hey, I want to try an actual business, I'd say go for it.
And I think what I love is the fact that there is that choice available now, because when I was growing up, my parents, they encouraged me to go to university, to get have a job, get on the career ladder and to climb that career ladder. Never entered into my head whatsoever to run my own business, because that had not been the experience that I had had. And I think now for my children to go, well, there's several paths we can go on here. I think the draw for my 14-year-old is quite simply seeing his mum and his dad have been around for him all the time. So every school play, every sports event, every whatever has gone on, we haven't had to ask for time off. We haven't had to allocate, well, you've got so many days off, you've got so many days off, therefore I'll go to that, you go to that. And I think it's that sense of life by our design that he is drawn to. And I love the fact that he has that awareness of what we do has done for him as far as our family unit is concerned. And I
Yeah.
think that possibly is one of the benefits of social media and the like, because there is so much that social media has not done well, but at least it has brought other worlds into individual people's vision. So people start to be able to see beyond just what their parents introduce them to. And I think that that is beneficial as well. As far as the world that you reside in now, so, around speaking and around giving people the opportunity to find their feet, find their business from a speaking perspective, how do you think that fits into the whole self-worth, self-value? Because that is so interlinked with our relationship with money as well.
So how does speaking fit in with self-worth and self-value? I think that, and I see this, I think you can see a massive link, right? Because those who have that inherent self-worth and belief often don't have an issue expressing themselves or standing on stage because they've got something to say. It doesn't mean those who don't have self-worth don't have something to say. Of course they do. But you can often see that because those who have that kind of like dialed up self-worth, self-value don't necessarily, for one, or whether we like this expression or not, deal so much with imposter syndrome or who am I to say this, or will anybody believe me or like it, or this or that, versus those with slightly more dialed down. You can see a lot more of that. And of course, the other aspect of it is the ability to ask for your worth. So, for example, people that don't have the self-worth when they speak, they often won't ask for the fee versus those who do. Now, of course, there's the other spectrum, which is people that go too far with it. Well, I'm 20K speaker, right? It's like, why? So there's that aspect. But I feel people that have got it dialed in the right capacity, then they're okay having money conversations, and they're okay going, yes, that's great, or no, that's not enough, or even sometimes, oh, that's too much. It doesn't happen very often in the speaking world.
Yeah.
So I think they're massively interlinked, right? I think your ability to have belief in yourself and know the value that you bring often relates to the fee that you ask and your ability to stand on stage. And if you look at that kind of top 1% of speakers, the Tony Robbins, the big, I mean, obviously he does big events, but even when he speaks, right, and he does short, small, nothing he does is really short. The reason he can command the 2 million for whatever, 2 hours of his time is because he knows that's what he can make.
Yeah.
Right. He knows, well, if I'm not speaking that here, I'll be making it there, because he's got massive high self-worth, self-value. I mean, I'm not a huge Tony Robbinite, right? I'm not an anti. I respect the guy. But that's the key with people with high self-worth, that isn't arrogance, that they know what they're worth. They know, if I've tried, for example, a few years ago to get Jeff Bezos to come to a conference, and the response you get is he's very busy building the business. He won't be attending, right? He won't be speaking because he knows that's where he's going to make the money. Or if you pull him out, then you have to compensate. Yeah. And so that's the thing. So if you have an inherent understanding of your self-worth, then you're able to ask the value of that in money. That's where a lot of people fall down.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think is the secret's probably the wrong word, but I'll use the word secret just for efficiency's sake. What is the secret, do you think, of actually being able to harness your own self-worth when it comes to stating your fee?
I think it's number one, absolutely owning your expertise, right? If it's, I often get this, why do you charge what you charge? I'm like, well, I've written 6 books. I'm writing my 7th. I've been around for over a decade. I've worked with X amount of, I don't mean this like as a boastful list, but this is how you build up your fee, right? I've done this. I've, obviously these day and ages, another way you command your fee is by following. And that's something I've never massively invested in. Although LinkedIn, it's grown over the last 2 years, I've kind of stopped elsewhere. That's another way. If you've got a massive following, obviously, then you can command higher fees. But in terms of your self-value, it's really knowing what you bring to the table. But it goes beyond what you believe you bring to the table. It's like, well, I've got this, I've got years in this, I've done this, I've achieved this. And that's how you can base your fee. What a lot of people do is they base their fee on their passion or belief. So if someone goes, well, I believe I'm a 5K speaker, great. What makes you a 5K speaker? I just believe I am. That just doesn't work with an external booker or a conference organizer, right? But if they can see the kudos, so last month I did a talk in Birmingham and I got around the 4 figures, and we had the conversation, they checked me out and I said, yeah, it's yours, right? We can see you're worth it. So to command the fee you want is about expertise. It's also a belief aspect, and it's also about being able to be okay with having the money conversation. And again, that's where people falter. The amount of people like Stephanie that worked with me 3 years ago, she's like, I kind of groomed her to have the money conversation. Of course, within that, there's levels you can go. So we practiced, and she did what I asked her to do, which was ask what was, what did she say? I think she said, what's the speaker budget? And they said anything between 1,000 to 3,000. She went, okay, well, 1,000's good. And then she went, just out of curiosity, how much would you have paid me? And they went, well, someone with your podcast and was written a book, we would have paid you more like 3.5 to 5. So even when you're like ready for the money conversation, it's about being okay with it going up or down, not just going, I asked the question, I got the answer, thank you very much, snatch.
Yeah.
It's sitting comfortably. So for example, when I had that conversation with the person that booked me, we had that really cool conversation. I was like, do you want to address the budget? I was like, sure. And I use the same. So what's your budget for the speaker? And he said, well, if you're 100 grand, we won't hire you. So I don't charge 100 grand. What were you thinking? And he's like, 5. I was like, okay, let's do it. I had 3.5 in my mind. So I was happy when he said 5. So that's what I mean. Sometimes it can come lower and sometimes it can come higher. But it's being okay with whatever comes your way.
Yeah, absolutely. And unless you have the conversation, you're not going to know. But also, I think by saying what is your budget, it feels far better than saying, what are you going to offer me? Because you're actually taking the spotlight away from you and you're putting it back on the person you're having the conversation with. What's your budget? There's nothing personal in there. It's what is the budget that's been set for this event? And then you can decide when that figure is mentioned, are you comfortable with it or are you not comfortable with it? Yeah.
And sometimes you do get, what do you charge? And you have to be okay with giving the answer.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where kind of having a range comes in. Well, look, I'm between 3.5 to 10. Right. And it's that old cliche, know your walk away. But again, people get very uncomfortable with when you start talking numbers, or the amount of people in some of the trainings or the groups, you belong to, or other, they go, oh, well, I've asked them to tell me how much they want to pay me. Well, you're just signaling that you're not ready.
Not owning. Yeah.
You're not owning, but you're also signaling that you're not professional or that you're not quite ready. And they'll just move on. Go, oh, I don't want to tell them what I'm paying them. I want them to tell me what they want to charge. Then I'll make a decision. Or what's the budget? So that's a key difference. Again, that's part of knowing your value and your self-worth.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think as well, it's being prepared to either walk away or to get a no, because you do know your self-worth and self-value and are not prepared to compromise on that. And that has to be a conversation you have with yourself as well. When you're opening up the money conversation, this is how far, I am prepared to go. And if that person is not prepared to meet me, I then have a decision to make. So being prepared to have those different forms of conversation.
Yeah. And I think it's also how much you want to do that speaking gig, right? Last year I was flown out to Belfast to do a gig, and it was nowhere near my fee, but I really wanted to do it. They covered my cost. They paid me a bit. It was in Belfast. I'd never been to Belfast. It was a student union. I really wanted to do it. So I accepted that fee, right? So to me, of course, payments a part of it, but it's not the leading factor. There's some I'll just walk away. No, not for me. But if like, I really want to do the gig. Let's make it work. And I think that's another way to think about it.
Yeah, and I agree. It does have to come down to what could this lead to? What can it provide me with? Even if that provision is video that you can use after to create your show reel, a way to talk about when I spoke at X event, when I spoke in front of X audience. And I think very often a lot of people think of the money conversation in a very binary way, rather than thinking around the conversation and actually sitting down with yourself and working out, where am I as a speaker? Where do I want to get to? What's going to help me to get there in the first place? Where are my absolute red lines that I'm not prepared to go over? But equally, where are those points where I'm happy to do something because it's going to be for a bigger gain further down the line?
Yeah, I think you said that beautifully.
Thank you. And what is interesting, I think, and this holds true for lots of entrepreneurs, I feel, very often there isn't the concern necessarily about how am I going to present what I do? How effective am I going to be? The bigger concern is having that money conversation. And that money conversation is something that you can prepare for in exactly the same way as you can prepare that presentation, that talk, that workshop. So would you recommend that people who want to be paid to do what they do, that they actually prepare that conversation in the same way?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, when I talk about training or, preparing to be a speaker, you prepare for what can go wrong just as much as you prepare for what can go right. Most people only prepare for what can go right. So I think it's important you prepare for that conversation, you prepare for outcomes. Like you mentioned, you prepare for alternatives. So if they can't pay you, okay, how can I commercialize that? And I think, again, it's the intention behind why you're speaking or what speaking gives to you. And if you're a professional speaker, obviously that's what you do full time. So they won't consider it unless they're paid. And I understand that. But, there's obviously speak to get paid, but there's speak to sell, and there's speak to raise your brand, and there's speak by association, like who you're seen on stage with. And I think that's depends what's the why behind, what's the purpose of your speaking. And I think absolutely people should prepare generally to have money conversations, right? Generally to have conversations about negotiation. But of course, when it comes to speaking, they should prepare that same kind of conversation. I think that's an integral part of preparation, is being prepared for the conversation you're going to have and the outcomes that you want.
Absolutely. What do you wish you had done differently in terms of your relationship with money?
Gosh, I think there's a lot of things I obviously I don't necessarily believe in regret, but I think if there was a way, or if I could have done things differently, I think for a start, when I was touring many moons ago, touring Germany and all the, I would have kept the cash a lot more, because I would get paid weekly in cash and I would spend the cash. Now, if you think that for 6 months I had no rent to pay, no food to buy, except when we were not on tour or such, I would have left that with quite a severe amount of money or cash, right? I wish I'd saved that, really, more than anything. I think because that would have been a really good nest egg to build from. And I was I already owned a flat in Leeds at that point, but I felt it would have given me more of a nest egg.
Carry on, yeah.
Good. I feel that I wish I was better, like you must say this, with saving, when I had it. I think, when I sold the property in Leeds, maybe spending 10 grand on myself was a bit extravagant. I did reinvest it and buy the property in Cardiff, but still, I took 10K and that was mine to play with, have fun. Whoa, look at me. Right. Or maybe it was at 8. It was around that. It was a lot, even for the time. And we're talking 2001 or 2. you know, so
20 years ago, over 20 years
yeah,
ago. Yeah.
right. So even then, it's quite a bit. I could have
Yeah.
done a lot more. So I think
Yeah.
I kind of wish I didn't. You know, I bought PlayStation, I bought clothes. I went, no, it's great, but you know, there's a lot more I wish. I think, and then obviously educated myself further on wealth and understanding wealth. Those are kind of my top
Yeah.
three. Yeah.
And I think, though, you know, the fact that financial literacy still isn't taught in very, very many schools, that the only way that we had to learn was from our mistakes, you know, unless our parents were financially literate and encouraged us to save, to invest, to learn about money. And I think for lots of us, you know, my money story was getting that application through, you know, when I went to university, having a credit card, because I knew nothing about having a credit card. I was offered, I can't remember, you know, what my credit limit was, but it was high compared to my ability to actually make that amount of money. And I only had to pay back a tiny amount each month.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, you know, as a student who didn't have very much money, that was really, really exciting. And it was only as my own relationship with money matured did I actually realize, hang on now, what you spent that on 3 years ago, you're still having to pay that back now at what interest rate? And
exactly.
I think because we only learn by our mistakes, unfortunately, then I think probably saving more and being aware of what you're consciously spending is something probably we all largely have in common with each other, because we haven't had the opportunity to do anything other than learn from experience, basically.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So for you, what are you excited about? We're now in 2023. What are you really looking forward to?
I think I'm excited to figure out where I'm going next, right? So I think after we've got the speaker awards coming up next month, and then after that, I'm going to make some interesting decisions, and you know, and I want to see where that leads. There is a potential of me, excuse me, taking over a company as well, so adding that to the portfolio. There's a lot of things right now. There's literally today we had a valuation of the house we're living in to potentially buy it. So there's stuff I'm looking at. So there's possibilities, and that's what excites me. I don't know where they're going to take me. I don't know what I'm going to decide. Normally I'm very like, yep, I know what I'm going to do, but this time I'm like, no, I'm going to make my decision post that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm excited about, really. I just want to see where I end up, where I land. Again, when I made that decision to make that decision, so that's when things opened up and suddenly all these things came to me. So let's see. That's what I'm excited about. I'm excited about almost not knowing where I'm going next and making some big decisions.
And I think that, you know, that is the huge upside of, you know, being an entrepreneur, just looking at what's available, what's possible, being in the world of other entrepreneurs and seeing what they're doing and the different journeys they're on, and being up for the art of the possible for us as individuals. And I think for me, I cannot imagine now working for somebody else and being constrained by the size of their vision and being a cog in them achieving their vision. And I think the fact that I don't plan my life, I should say, on a day-to-day basis, I actually now do look at the art of the possible. And I'm grateful, really, really grateful that I can do that. I don't have to think about when am I going to retire and counting down the days to retirement. It's actually all about what can I do to keep ensuring my children are looking at me and their dad and going, wow, mum and dad are continually evolving, continually doing things differently because we can.
Yeah.
And that must be a similar motivation for you as far as your family is concerned.
Yeah, I think to me, as long as I raise two great human beings, I think that's really what matters. And,
Yeah.
As long as I can be a great father to them, and husband, by the way, to my wife. It's not just about the kids. And to myself. I think that's what it is. Very similarly. But I'm not, people ask me this, if a job came along, would you, if it's the right job, I was headhunted a while ago, a few years ago, and we want you, it's you, 100 grand salary. It was like, well, here's my conditions. Like, no, you have to do it like this. No, I'm not interested because I don't need the job, right? If the right job came along with the right conditions and it gave me the right things, and maybe it won't, but maybe I would take it. I don't know. That's what I mean. I'm not completely like, oh, no job. Oh, no, stay away. Bad, right? Vampire, garlic. But no, it's not in my periphery to get a job. It is about me hopefully raising two incredible human beings that had the life or have the life that I didn't have. And that's what's really about for me.
Yeah. No, I can
offering them that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So how can people connect with you, Elliot?
I think LinkedIn is probably socially, like on socials is LinkedIn, Elliot Kay, Elliot, and then Kay, all spelt the correct way. None of this one T, double T, two T's, one L, none of that stuff. Elliot, and then space Kay, no E, Kay. You'll see a picture of me looking very cool. So just feel free to reach out to me there, add me, send me a message if I can support in any way. And then if there's anything kind of beyond that, speaking wise or, about speaking, you can either just send me a message on, I suppose the easiest is elliot@elliotkay.com, right? ELLIOT and then my name.com. That's the easiest way. It'll bounce to any of my emails. So that's the easiest, really.
And you are so supportive of everybody that's in your world who, wants to be a speaker, wants to get more confident about speaking, and wants to get more confident in understanding their value and their worth. You are brilliant at that. So thank you for all that you do for all us speakers who are trying to make our impact in the world. And
my pleasure.
All your contact details will be in the show notes so people can easily contact and connect with you. Thank you very much for your time today. I've really enjoyed speaking to you and hopefully catch up with you again soon.
Yeah, look forward to it. Take care.